Hey everyone, this is Balo, and for this video, we're going to talk about the presentation layer and the last layer that we're going to deal with in our clean architecture software development approach. And specifically, we're going to deal the following sa video na to. Of course, as usual, what is the role of this layer? Ano ba yung mga specific components within this layer? And lastly, how do we implement this in Flutter? Now, for this video, I'm going to cut this into different mini parts, no? Kasi as for the implementation, we will deal with a lot of stuff, like in particular yung Flutter, no, na framework, no, ano yung mga specific widgets that we're going to tackle, and as well as the state management, the approach that we're going to use, which will be the main focus of this first part of our presentation layer or late in the video. But anyway, so much for that. Let's dive into our discussion in the video natin now. So basically, the presentation layer displays the data to the user and handles user interactions and inputs, as you can see in this example. So everything na nakikita nyo dito, from the menus, the buttons, the navigations, anything visual right here, meron yang corresponding instruction or source code. Just like when you, if you're familiar with web pages, no, behind the scenes, they're just made of HTML na codes. But in this case, no, as for the language na gagamitin natin, we will be using the Dart language in order to create these UI elements na nakikita nyo. And also, as you notice, pag nag-click tayo ng button or tab, nag-navigate siya into a different screen. So there's also a specific instruction for that, and we will also dive into that. Paano ba tayo mag-jump from one screen or page to another? So yeah, that's pretty much it about actually meron pa pala, no? In the presentation layer, we also manage the state of the UI and update it in response to data changes. So also the presentation layer also communicates with the domain layer to retrieve and manipulate data, and you will see that in this diagram right here. So the user from the top now does something behind, let's say it clicks a button, it submits a form, it scrolls a screen or whatever, no, na basta nagigipag-interact siya with the elements, no, with the, in particular, the user is interacting with the presentation layer. And specifically sa presentation layer, yung mga nandito are pages and widgets, as well as the state management approach that we will be using now sa presentation layer. Then the presentation layer, as you can see now sa baba, as mentioned kanina, it also communicates with the domain layer, kasi whenever the user requests something via a button or a form or whatever action that will trigger a certain CRUD now request, let's say create, read, update, delete, it will forward that request to the domain layer, and so on and so forth. Alam nyo na ang mangyayari. Domain layer to the data layer, then back to from the data layer back to the domain layer, and babalik na siya sa presentation layer. So ganun yung flow. Now, let's talk about the mga individual na components ng presentation layer. We have widgets, which are basically UI components of the application. And examples of that are screens, dialogues, menus, the buttons, any mini elements that compose a certain screen, di ba? The buttons, the ano pa ba? The text field, where you type your inputs. So yun. As for the pages, it's just basically it's just composed of various widgets. Basically an entire screen now. And now, before we dive into the state management, let's talk about this important term now, which is state now. So what is a state? by the way, it's just a representation of the information that can change over time. And that all information also influences the appearance and behavior of the user interface. And ito yung mga examples of that state. Let's say, for example, list of items. Whenever something is deleted sa data, no, sa list natin items, we also have to make sure that it also is displayed na makikita din ni user sa screen. This list of item changes over time kasi sometimes we add a couple of items, we delete a couple of items, we update a couple of items. So yun, again, from the definition kanina, that is an information that changes over time and influences the appearance and behavior of the UI. Kasi whenever our information changes, the UI also has to reflect those changes. Kailangan makakita niya yun sa user. And, okay, so we have also network data. Like, monitor natin yung data if the application is offline or online. Diba? As you notice, may mga applications that displays differently pag offline and also displays the exact data pag online. Okay. Device orientation. So, the application also, diba, yung mobile app natin or cellphone natin can sometimes be in landscape or portrait na orientation. So, monitor din yan, no? And the UI will also adapt to the changes, no? Magbabago yung itsura ng UI natin depende sa kung ano yung kung nakatayo ba yung phone mo or not, no? Then menu index, basically the current menu that you are selecting with, no? Nababago din yan from time to time, no? So if you click the first menu, dapat yung lalabas din na page is yung para sa first menu. Let's say yung home page, no? So yun, that's pretty much it with states, no? Now let's talk about state management. State management, if we are going to literally rephrase it, it's just managing the state, no? But yung specific answer for this question is, when we say state management, we are basically tracking the changes to the state. Again, tracking or monitor, just synonyms lang yun. And updating the UI to reflect these changes. So ito, dalawa na to. So, we track, we monitor if the state has changed or not. If yes, then we update the UI to reflect the changes. Good. So, there are different state management approaches, specifically sa Flutter, no? And we have, these are the popular ones. We have the block, provider, Riverbond, Redux, MobX. But we're going to focus in particular yung block kasi ito yung pinaka-popular and most often used na state management approach. And yeah, let's talk about block in deeper detail, no? Basically, this is how it works, no? How does a block state management approach work? Ganito lang yan. Now, we have these three components: the UI or user interface, basically whatever the user sees. Then we have the block, or yung meaning nito, no, naka-acronym kasi ito, business logic component. Yeah. And then the third one is the domain layer. So what happens is, whenever a user does something to the UI, let's say whenever it clicks a button, submit button, or okay, no, let's say mag-add siya ng item sa to-do list niya. So it's going to emit an event, the block ng component. Then once na-inform si block na, may event na, mag-get siya ng mag-add siya ng item, so it's going to send that request to the domain layer. Hey, domain layer, you add this item, no? And meanwhile, habang fina-fulfill yan yung domain layer, and of course, it's going to take time, especially if it's an online application, the block component is going to emit a new state na, hey, UI, loading state tayo. So, if the UI now, inform na siya, oy, loading state pa na tayo, okay, it's going to change the UI into, let's say, for example, merong maglo-load, yung familiar kayo with the circular na progress na nag-rotate, or perhaps it's as progress bar, pwedeng dialogue na lalabas, please wait, something like that. So, yun yung i-display ng UI. Habang fino-fulfill pa ni domain layer yung request na yun. And once tapos na si domain layer, it's going to return either the entity or a failure to the block. And then the block, once it receives it, the entity failure from the domain layer is going to emit a new state sa UI na, hey, loaded state. Since the UI has been informed, oy, loaded state pa na, it's going to replace that progress widget, or let's say circular, whatever. Basta hindi na siya maglo-load, sa stop na siya, and it's going to now display whatever, since add item man yung request, it will probably display a message to, hey, successfully added. If this was an event na get all items or get all to-do list, well, of course, it will load, it will display a loading screen, then pag successful na nagawa na ni domain layer yung role yan, na-return niya yung list of entities, then it will emit a loaded state, tapos ilo-load na sa screen yung mga items. So, ganun yung mangyayari with this block state management approach. And now, let's dive into the coding part. So, now before we begin, I just want to pakita ko sa inyo itong extension na to, no? We have this, what we call is the block na extension, no? Since na-install ko na to, so makikita nyo na yan kaagad. But let's say wala pa, you're just going to type that block and it will display suggestions. Make sure that ito lang, it is particular by Felix Angelov, no? You click that install button. Of course, iba na yung itsura niyan kasi na-install ko na siya. But click that install button right there. And once na successful na yan, it's going to sort of indicate nga, hey, you need to restart the VS Code kasi hindi pa yan lalabas yung feature na yan. So, what you're going to do is you're going to exit that. Close yan. Okay? And balik kayo ulit with the VS Code. So that's the only way I could think of, no, and how to restart the editor natin, no. I don't know if there's wala dito walang restart button dito. I just click the exit and then reopen it again. And now we navigate to our presentation layer right here. Yeah, ano pala dito? Size pa lang. Yeah, ito. Okay. Ay, papakita pa lang sa inyo, but we're not going to do anything right here. Kasi, what we're going to do next is, punta tayo sa command palette, and we type block. Now, meron yung lalabas dyan. In fact, I already, yung command na kailangan natin i-execute is already shown kasi this is the recently used. There are two options, no? One is the block, which is like, yung na-discuss ko kanina, and the other one is qubit. So, ito yung gagamitin natin in actual qubit. They are the same, but yung qubit is the simplified approach or version, the simplified versions of block. So, yung block, meron pa mga meron pa siyang mga cheche-boreche, and it's more suitable for advanced needs, no? But kung simple lang yung kailangan mo, just simple code, enough na itong qubit, no? In fact, it's advisable you start with a qubit muna, and if the project demands for a more advanced feature, then you just simply translate it to block. Madali lang naman to transition from qubit to block. But anyway, click this one, And then since this is an expense, no, although I do have another feature here, budget. So far sa mga videos ko na nakaraan, expense tayo. So we'll just focus muna with expense. And then hit enter. And it's going to prompt where kasi yung gagawin natin, no? Wait lang. Okay. For the first time, na pag ano mo dito, it's going to display the contents of the lib. We have the core and the features, no, where nandito yung presentation layer natin, no? So we're going to open the folder, then choose expense, open the presentation folder, and then you click this one, select folder to create a qubit in. Now, you can notice, no, meron na tayong dalawang auto-generated na files. Now, you notice that there's a red to indicate na error, no? Kasi, although na-generate nga siya ng VS Code na extension, but technically, this is not yet existing sa sa project natin, no? Yung library na to or yung package na to. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new dependency sa Flutter app project natin, and the name of that is Flutter_block. So ano lang, just type the usual command, Flutter pub add Flutter_block, and then hit enter. And of course, you need to make sure that meron kang internet in order for that to be successful. And makikita nyo din yan sa pub spec. As you notice, na-install na siya. So this is the newly added dependency. And finally, we go back to our file right here. Wala na siyang error na lumalabas because it's already So next, now as much as I would love to like manually upcode everything right here, since we do have AI, no, and we will leverage the power of AI in order for us to complete whatever is anong lalagay natin dito. But anyway, yung qubit, itong first file na to is like the main class mismo, expense qubit. And meron siyang nakalagay dito is expense state, no? Tapos dito, this file right here this is where we're going to define yung mga different states ng expense natin for the expense lang in particular, no? So far meron na siyang expense initial, and this is very important kasi like this is the initial state, like wala pang nangyayari na state. Yun yung ibig sabihin nito. Initial state. Yeah, nothing's going on. No. That's why pag tinawag yung super, so ito yung tatawagin. No, initial. Anyway, now, actually, meron akong na-prepare na dito sa ChatGPT. So, yung gagawin niya dito is you try to ask your ChatGPT if you can still recall pa yung entities na memorize pa ba niya sa memory niya, no? Pati yung mga expense use case. If yes, it's going to display, although ito mali yung pagkano niya kasi repository implementation eh. But anyway, if hindi niya maalala, you can just simply go back to your entity sa domain layer, then just copy everything. And then save this to your memory. Blah, blah, blah. Paste and then hit enter. Something like that. Okay? So, yung main point lang dyan is you're going to command ChatGPT to memorize these codes kasi the follow-up code or prompt we're going to use is this one. Write a qubit state management for the expense use cases. So, depende sa kung ano yung feature ninyo. Let's say, expense man yung sa akin kasi expense tracker man ito. But you need to replace this one to whatever project you are working with. Right. And the qubit requires CRUD use case instances in the constructor, and you will see that later on, and a local cache of entity list. So pag in-enter mo na yan, it's going to generate these following codes. Now, yung first na generate niya is the states. So I'll just copy this one, copy code. Then I will go to my state right here. And I'll just highlight everything except yung first, dito. You make sure you're not, wag nyo itong itama yung first part. Kasi importante yan eh. Yung part of, paste nyo yan, and there you go. Na meron lang ako i-edit lang dito kasi hindi ako satisfied. Of course, siyempre, tatanggalin natin to. We're going to remove these imports. They should not be there. Ito, we will mabifix yan later on. Kasi the reason for that is, technically, although separate tong file na to, itong expense state, this is still part of the expense qubit. So, parang hinati lang sila. But, dapat, if ever there are any kulang dito, like yung expense, thread siya, that will be imported right here instead. Dito. Not here. So, that's why we remove that imports na copy natin kanina. And yung gusto ko i-delete dito is yung expense updated. Because I feel like this is not useful for me. Yung mga importante dito is the initial state, the loading state to indicate na in progress na yung CRUD request. And then this one is for the success. Yeah. And then sometimes hindi naman successful all the time yung CRUD operation or request. So we also render expense error na state. And yeah, it will display. It's going to ask a string message, but yung loaded, it's going to be needing a list of expenses. So, these are the states na we're going to use. Iba-ibang states. Initial, loading, loaded, and then the error. Now, let's go to the qubit, which is ito yung pinaka-main file talaga. And we just scroll until we reach this one, copy-paste that, and replace it. Now, you make sure not to tamper this line 4. And then, boom. Of course, there's something wrong kasi pag generate. Ewan kung bakit nagkaganito. Pero I'll just copy-paste na lang this. But I will remove some parts right here. Like, eto. Tanggalin ko to. And once i-control S ko yan, it will automatically format itself. So, yun, fix ko. But I don't need this map failure message because this will make our code inflexible. Anyway, I have a solution for this now. Yeah. Or pwede rin. Like, kayong bahala dyan. But I'll just leave it there. Anyway, you have the freedom to like customize. This is just merely a suggestion. But anyway, asa na tayo? Okay. Now di na to add expense use case kasi I already renamed this to add expense because I feel like redundant na siya or mas mahaba na yung pangalan ng class if my use case. Just lang. Simple as that. Okay, so red siya now. So we're going to import that. Kulang lang naman yan ng import. And of course, as we all know, these are existing sa entities this sa domain layer na folder. So, yun lang. Just control that. Oh, yeah. Pag quick fix ko, wala siya noon. Wala siyang sinadjust na import kasi yung dito sa use case is edit expense man. So, dapat edit expense to. And then, yun. Now, I can import. Okay. That's it. Now, although we have a couple of 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 use cases right here. Apat lang yung inano ko dito. But just for the sake of demonstration, we'll just focus lang on these 4 na use cases. But we can add more now if you want. No? Pwede ka ba mag-define dito ng final filter expense? Then you make sure that kung ilan yun nandito, 4 yan, dapat 4 din yan dito sa constructor natin. Okay, so wait a minute. I'll just update lang this kasi para ba ito so kahit ano lang siguro, I'll just make this one hindi ko lang ito ipa-private lang para madali lang oh yeah, I also rename. I'll just lang muna before tayo proceed. I'll just rename a couple of. Wait. Oh, sorry. Ay, oo nga. Okay, phone flip pala siya. Oh, sige. Na lang, tatanggalin ko na lang yung underscore. Yan. Okay, so this is how you rename pala. By the way, you don't manually yan, no? Just click the symbol, it will automatically rename all. Yeah, pansin nyo, no? Okay, what else do I need to fix out here? Eto, wala pa to hindi pa to na import. Yan. Some more, ano ba? Just check. Okay, so yung mga na lang dito is we have eto wala na kasi ito So I'll just rename this to expense loaded. Yan. And okay. Now, eto dinilit ko na to. Because I have a different approach with this. Although you could do yung kanina. Kasi yung lang naman dito is map failure. Basically yung method na yun is just going to check lang naman kung if network failure, ito yung i-return mo na message. If server failure, ito yung ito tap. But yung gagawin ko is different, no? What I'm going to do is I will go to the failure class and I'm going to update this once again because I want this failure to have a function string get message. And what it's going to do lang naman is because since it already has a message, it's just going to return message. Yan lang. But now, eto. Since yung API failure, meron siyang status code na attribute, no? And we're going to implement, or rather, we're going to override yung sa failure so that it has its own implementation sa get message. Copy paste this one. And we make sure that merong override yan, okay? Since we are overriding this get message so that hindi yung it will have its own implementation sa get message sa parent niya kasi API failure is extending a failure, no? We just leave lang yung cache and general failure to get message lang. But anyway, since the reason why we override is because yung iba yung implementation ito, and what we want is instead, first we're going to display the status code. Tapos follow it up by the message exactly. So yun. So we can't do this. We can't do this one. Kung i-copy paste mo dyan dito. mag-error talaga yan kasi yung status code is not existing sa cache failure. It's already existing lang sa API failure. That's why we have an override. Override natin yung get message. So yeah, that's pretty much it with this. Just update these failures. And we, na dito. Yung gagawin natin is, di ba? Ko lang muna later ko talaga explain, no? But basically, what happens is, this failure, itong object na to, what we're going to do is, tatawagan natin yung get message. Yan. So, regardless, whatever kind of failure ba to, server failure, API failure, cache failure, general failure, since they all have a get message na method, is going to polymorph, no? If you're familiar with polymorphism, nagbabago yung behavior nito, yung method nito, depende kung yung specific type that this failure is, no? So, kung API failure to siya, yung own implementation niya sa get message yung tatawagin. Instead, yung get message sa parent niya na class which is failure. Yeah, nagiging mas dynamic and flexible yung code natin with this approach. So I'll just also update it also with the rest of the errors right here para mawala na to sila. And yeah, so yan. Okay, so we're not done. Wala na yung mga errors, and now let's dive into the explanation of the code. Now, yung expense qubit natin is going to need the help of use cases. So as we have sa CRUD, no? So technically we need 4 specific na mga use cases: add, delete, edit, and get. Now, also, ito qubit na to also contains a local cache of expenses. So pag sinabing local cache, para it has its own list of expenses, and you will see later on why we need a local cache of expenses, no? Itong qubit na to. So by default, blank lang muna siya, empty. Kasi the only time na magkakaroon to ng list, no, is once we call this one, yung fetch all expenses. Actually, we're going to rename this na lang pala to, no? This should be get all. Yan. Oh yeah, eto pala, Wait. I think I should remove this one. Wala yang purpose. Wait. Now, sige, let's start with the get all expense. And actually, yung yung structure ng code niya is just the same lang with the other, except yung update medyo lang may pagkabat. As pare-pareha lang talaga. And what I mean by that is, first, once, diba, going back sa code natin, diba, sa UI, once the user does something that will trigger a event, no? In this case, let's say, for example, request siya ng get all expense. So, tatawagin tong function na to, and then what's going to happen is the qubit is going to emit an expense loading state sa UI. And of course, ma-receive yan ni UI, matatanggap niya yan yung itong emit na to nga. So, the UI will also update the UI. So, perhaps lalabas yung loading screen or my circular progress bar, progress indicator na lalabas. Then, after that, it will communicate with the domain layer to fulfill that specific CRUD request. So, yung get all expenses. Tawagin niya. And of course, it will return either failure or list of expense. So, once ma-receive na natin yung result, now, we will call the fold method. Kasi yung fold method is just ano lang naman. We're just detailing what happens now. If failure yung natanggap natin, ito yung mangyayari. Otherwise, kung successful yung result, yung na-return is a list, do this instead. So yun yung nangyayari dito basically. But specifically sa failure, pag failure yung na-return dito sa result, we're going to emit a new state na expense error with a specific message. So once ma-emit tong expense error na to, it will tell the UI, hey, update your UI display. Tignan mo na yung paglo-load. Dapat mag-display ka ng error message sa user mo sa screen with this message. So, yun yung mayayari yan. Otherwise, pag successful, we were able to get a list of expenses. Okay, first, let's save this data. So, the qubit is going to have its own copy locally. Then, the qubit will emit expense loaded, and it will also load then yung expense na na-receive niya from the use case, from the domain layer. Because once matawag to or once ma-emit na itong expense loaded sa UI, now, basically, it's telling the UI, hey, tignan mo na yung pag-loading mo, i-load mo na, i-display mo na itong mga expense list na to sa user. Yeah, so yun. Basically, that's how it works. And it's also the same thing with the add expense. Expense loading, communicate with the domain layer, get the result. Now, yung iba kasi yung result dito is either failure or void. So, technically, we don't get a specific result, but a status lang. Kung successful ba, hindi. Kung failure, do this instead. If successful, like void yung status, okay, do this instead. So, it's going to, yung gagawin lang is yung expense na yun, that was successfully added or included sa database, we have to make sure that we also add that sa local na cache. And then, that local cache na bagong add, yung along with the newly added expense, i-display din natin yan sa UI. Once by calling the emit expense loaded na state. Yun. For the delete expense, same pa rin. Diyan lang sila nagkakaiba pagdating dito sa itong portion na to. So this time, actually, yung explanation lang naman nito is if let's say successful na na-delete tong expense na to sa database, sa server, sa Firebase to be exact, dito naman sa local cache natin na list of expenses, we remove that as well. So, how do we remove that? Iisahin lang naman, i-check one by one. Does the ID of this item, list number 1, equal sa ID ng expense na to? If not, sige, proceed, so on and so forth. Yun lang. And yung update, parehas din. But yung goal niya is tatawagin niya yung index where in order to locate the index of the expense doon sa list sa local cache the expenses index na index 0, index 1 sa array ba in particular index array. So if nahanap siya, let's say for example yung expense, yung ID niya is 1. Tapos doon sa cash expenses, yung expense na yun whose ID is 1 is located at the index 1 sa array natin dito sa cash expense. So let's say yung answer dito is 1. Check dito. Okay, if the index is not equal to 1, which is true naman, do this instead. Okay. So in this case, pag mayroon tayong index or na-found yung expense na yun sa list, sa array natin na list, we just simply update that. We replace the old element with a new expense. Yun lang. And then emit loaded. This time we load again the cash expense pero updated na. May updated version na. Otherwise, kung hindi siya nahanap, like -1 yung index kasi hindi siya existing, emit this expense error, the expense that found in cash. So, yeah. So that's it for this video about so far. We're just tackling pa lang the expense qubit, and we're actually not done yet, no, kasi we're just defining lang the qubit, no, but we are yet to use this or integrate this qubit sa UI, no. And the next video we're now going to tackle the different widgets na, or yeah, I'm still thinking ano ba yung next one dito, but definitely we'll tackle how, or discuss how we're going to consume or utilize the expense qubit, you know. As in particular, yung itong mga methods na to, tatawagin natin yan somewhere sa Flutter UI natin, itong mga methods na to, delete, update, yeah. So yun lang, and if you have any questions, leave it in the comment section, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.